I want to be the best there ever was, to beat all the rest, yeah, that's my cause.
Electro, Mr. Mind, Dinklet, Knitter and Mank, Mr. Mind, Keith Venusaur, Tat Top, Fear, Mr. Mind, 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 Mr. Mind.
Mastermind! Hey my friends, welcome back to the Knife Lab. Sorry it's been a little minute. Just having the kids home from school for the whole holidays. Just gives me less time to do this. What I've done today is put the same edge on two buck knives. One is the classic 420 HC. The other is the 20 CV sort of fancy man edition, I guess you would say. So both, yeah, same edge, 17 degrees mirror polished on a KME sharpening system to 0.1 microns on the kangaroo leather strops. This one took about a third of the amount of time as this one, so some indication already perhaps of the differences in hardness, in complexity of the steels, perhaps, whatever. What I'm going to do though is I'm going to cut rope with both in about the same manner as I can manage. We're going to see what the improvements are, whether they be only slightly incremental or stratospheric, between CPM 20 CV with the Pole Boss heat treatment and the 420 HC with the Pole Boss heat treatment. Now this is already pretty well established as one of the better ways of running this very rather old-fashioned steel. Buck gets good results from combining a good heat treatment with a good grind. This knife appears to have about the same grind, albeit it's a drop point, but largely same height, same thickness behind the edge, hollow grind, really well done. What I'm wondering is if the same wizardry is being worked using the 20 CV steel, or as they sort of are known for working with the HC steel, the 420 HC. I'm not sure what Rockwell hardness they run it at. You would hope it would be 60 at least to make the most of a steel like this, but I really don't know. Other examples of this steel have got about anything from between 500 and 600 cuts or so, I believe, in the same test. I believe my TRM Atom, which runs this steel in about 61, got about 550 off the top of my head. Anyway, I'll correct myself down below if that's wrong. You can watch that video as well if you want to know more about either of these steels. I've tested them several times. You can write Cedric, Ada, and then a steel name, and you'll probably come up with something that I've done in the past in your YouTube search bar. So, without further ado, let's talk about the HC first, 420 HC. See how much rope it cuts, being 10mm twisted sisal rope. Before it no longer cuts paper, of course, we're using Old Faithful cutting board, which later recently has become two smaller cutting boards, but they sort of hold together well enough. See how that goes. So let's get into it. 420 HC first. Alright, so a really good result from the 420 HC. So it's 175 cuts. Keeping in mind that's about the best edge I can do, with possibly about the best heat treatment behind the edge stuff going on that you can probably get in a 420 HC knife. That's a really good result. It's a result that it matches like VG10 with a lesser perhaps heat treatment or grind, or edge finish or something. So it's really, as I always say, it really pushes that 420 HC up into the sort of next class of steels. I've got, back when I used to do work sharp edge testing, this was always a little bit ahead. It was getting to like 80 or 90 cuts or even 100 cuts, I believe. Yeah, it's a good history of work behind Buck's 420, that's for sure. So yeah, that's an interesting starting point, 175. So we'll see what kind of improvement the CPM 20 CV gets you. keeping in mind that you're generally going to be getting yourself a more limited edition type buck, or like maybe a shorter run edition or something like that. And you're going to be paying a fair bit more money for it too. So thinking about the standard buck, which I know in America they're about $55, $60, I believe. In Australia, these are about $130, but that's just kind of how these things go. This one in Australia probably about $250. So there we go. Let's see how much twist to sell rope this one cuts. So just rewatched the TRM video. Now with the factory edge, not even, which I don't believe was 17 degrees, probably was similar or so. Thin blade 2, TRM Adam did 500 cuts with the same steel. I would wager, because I know that Adam runs at about 61 Rockwell, this might only be about 59 or 60 or something. That might account for the lower numbers. Of course, there's all sorts of variables when I do a test. I'm just a human and I'm just doing it in my shed, so this isn't CERN, you know, I'm not splitting atoms or anything like that. I'm not running a large hadron collider or anything. So, of course, there's lots of reasons why test results can be different, but could very well be that this is a couple of points lower on the Rockwell scale or something similar. The TRM Atom had a slightly, well, actually a fairly much longer lasting edge, and that was just with the factory angle. It wasn't with like a really nice edge that I'd put on here. Other instances of CPM have been at CPM 20 CV have been at about 400 or so, and that was before I was using a KME sharpening system to put these mirror polished edges on as well. So I'd say this is about standard middle of the pack 20 CV is what you're going to get on production knives. I always say if you want true steel performance, you're going to want to hook yourself up with a custom maker who can, you know, custom heat treat it for you and all that sort of thing. Production wise, it's about, yeah, par for the course, run of the mill, you know, median level 20 CV, which is, I guess, interesting because you think, oh, it's buck, it's got the Boss heat treat, all that sort of stuff. It's not a bad heat treat, of course not. It's actually a fairly easy knife to sharpen. It wasn't too bad. Took longer than the 420HC, obviously, but maybe that's an aspect they're going for. Maybe they heat treat it for balance rather than for sheer edge retention. Who knows? But certainly not bad, but certainly not, I guess you think about how this is about the best version of the 420HC you can get. Certainly not quite there, as in being the equivalent for this type of steel chemistry. The Rockwells may even be slightly similar, and it's just the extra elements and attributes of the steel that push this, you know, to be over double the edge retention, of course, which is still great. But yeah, just perhaps not the super Super Saiyan God Super Saiyan steel that this you know, might be assumed to be when you see the little Boss flame on the blade. So that's my results for this Knife Lab edition, Buck versus Buck. Thank you for watching, and thank you very much, Chris, for sending this guy along for edge testing. Thanks.